Hello everybody, my name's Pam and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I teach English lessons, I sometimes give information about study abroad, and I specialize in the PTE exam. And today we're going to look at the PTE, or the Pearson Test of English exam. I want to help you with the PTE essay. The essay question is super important because it gets you a lot of points for your PTE. You must get a good essay score to get a good overall score. And on my YouTube channel, I already have 3 videos about the PTE essay. I strongly recommend you go back and look. I have one video about planning, one about writing, and one about checking your essay. They are all short videos, like less than 10 minutes each, and I think you'll really benefit from them. PTE made many changes to the format of their test in August 2025. So I'm making today's video to reassure you that you can still use my old videos for strategies, but also to show you how to do that in real time. Let's work through how to write an essay together. So that's what we'll do today. We'll write a whole essay from beginning to end together. I also want to point out that yes, PTE has made some changes, but the essay is still as it always was. The scoring hasn't changed, the format hasn't changed. The only difference is that now there are sometimes human examiners checking. Not always. PTE continues to be a computer-checked exam. AI and algorithms will score you, but human examiners will choose random tests and they'll check to make sure you're not cheating, basically. Because there are a lot of people who will just memorize entire essays and then regurgitate that in the exam. And a computer cannot always tell if you have done that. I have always said that that's a risky move. And now Pearson is really focusing on making sure that you cannot take that risk by using human examiners to check. Okay, so don't do it. There's no need. It's not good for your English. It's not going to help you. And now you might get caught. What do you need to know about the PTE essay? Firstly, how long is it? 200 to 300 words. Secondly, how much time do you have? You have 20 minutes. So that's really short time to write 200 to 300 words, right? If you do an IELTS test, you get 40 minutes for about the same number of words. So IELTS expects a little bit higher quality. PTE really expects you to manage your time. So I strongly recommend that you use 3 minutes to plan. It will save you time in the long run. 12 minutes to write, and then 5 minutes to check your essay. Nobody ever has 5 full minutes to check, but aim for that. It's your best chance, okay? Timing is key. All right, so let's go through and look at a typical essay that you might need to do for the PTE. Some say that AI will cause a breakdown of society. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Now, a lot of you will waste time here and try to analyze the question, is this a descriptive essay? Is this an argumentative essay? What should I do? You don't need to think about it. In PTE, always follow argumentative essay style. So I strongly recommend you choose a side. You don't even need to try and offer a balanced opinion. That may be better if you have the time, and if you want to express your real feeling, that's probably better. But in the short time you've got for PTE, argue one side or the other. It's faster, it's easier. You can write a better essay in a short amount of time. Now, I always recommend that you follow this same plan. Okay? Introduction, you just need to decide if you agree or disagree. So in my case, I'll say I disagree. Yeah? I don't think AI will cause a breakdown of society. In real life, maybe I'm a little bit more mixed, but for my essay, I'll strongly disagree. Now I need 2 reasons to back up my idea. So let's see. One reason I think AI will not cause a breakdown of society. I think AI helps us work faster and better. Another reason, I think AI provides innovation. So those 2 reasons are going to become the first 2 paragraphs in the body of my essay. Now, I want for my third body paragraph, I want what we call a counter-argument. A counter-argument means what other people will say if they disagree with me. Okay, so people who think AI is bad, what would they say? And obviously, the biggest argument will be job loss. Yeah? People will lose their jobs. And I also need a but here because I can't let that counter argument win. So I'll say, okay, job loss, but people will possibly have more free time to enjoy life. Okay, so maybe we have a positive spin on AI here. But you need to do that. You need the counter argument and then the argument against the counter argument. And then finally, I recommend that you have a should sentence. You'll use this in your conclusion. I'll show you when we write. And that should sentence would be something like, people should use AI, or governments should do something, or big business should do something, or schools should do something. Okay? But somebody should. That's what you want to have in the final part of your plan. Okay? Done. Now, when you're writing your essay, I strongly recommend you use a template. I do not mean one of those crazy long templates that's basically an entire essay memorized. Please do not use those. But you should have some kind of structure. Yeah, you need to follow academic structure. So the easiest way to do that is to memorize phrases that will force you into structure. And if you memorize the phrases exactly, then you're probably not going to make mistakes with your grammar and vocabulary of them. I have put my recommended template in a Google Doc in the link in the description below. Okay, so please feel free to use that. I've got 2 templates in there. One if you are aiming for 65, one if you are aiming for 79 or 80 plus. But I recommend start out with the simple one. It's better to be clear. Yeah, the more complex language you use, the more risks you have of making mistakes. So if you are an intermediate level student, if you are B1, then I recommend stay with my simple template. If you're a strong B2 or higher, then you should try the other template, but start with the simple one first and then switch over after you've gotten used to the structure. Okay, so let's go with the simple template we're going to use today, and we're going to sub in the points from the plan, and that's all you need to do. Okay, so many people argue about whether, and in this case, I will say artificial intelligence will damage society or improve it. Simple, right? So I've just taken the question, changed the words just a little bit, and put it in with my templated sentence. Now, my template introduction is only 2 sentences. Yeah? So the first sentence is announcing a general theme. The second sentence is giving the opinion. So, many people argue about whether artificial intelligence will damage society or improve it. In my opinion, AI will bring more benefits than problems as long as it is managed responsibly. Done. 2 sentences, it's enough, okay? All right, so then you move on to subbing in your reasons into the next 2 paragraphs. Now, for body paragraphs, I recommend that each paragraph should be 3 sentences. of course, adjust based on what you need, but you need at least 3 sentences. You need one that gives your reason, one that explains your reason, and one that gives an example. And that will work every time. So let's look. Firstly, AI improves efficiency and accuracy in many fields. So you can see I've just given my reason, yeah? In the plan, I had said AI helps us work far better. Now, I've made my vocabulary a little fancier, and I have put firstly at the beginning. Putting firstly is very important. It's a signal to anybody reading or the AI that you have a structure, that you are organized. So please make sure you include firstly. It's in the template. Okay, so firstly, AI improves efficiency and accuracy in many fields. This is because machines can analyze huge amounts of data faster than humans. So you've given the reason. This is because. Now, here, you can use this is because or this means. I'm using this is because here because I'm talking about a reason for why AI now is already improving efficiency and accuracy. But if I wanted to give a reason for something that might happen in the future, I'll use this means. Okay? So you need to decide each time, do I want to talk about now and the past, or do I want to talk about the future? If it's now and the past, this is because. If it's the future, this means. Okay, so next. For example, doctors now use AI to identify diseases at an early stage, which saves lives. Okay, you've given your example. So done. You have your first body paragraph done. Easy. And then you use exactly the same pattern for the second body paragraph, but instead of saying firstly, you say secondly, and you sub in your second reason. So secondly, AI creates opportunities for innovation and progress. This means it can solve problems and create opportunities in areas that humans struggle with, such as climate modeling and language learning. Okay, so did you see I used this means here? For instance, language teachers are already using AI to improve the quality and amount of language they provide as examples for their students. I used an example that I understand deeply as a language teacher. I recommend you do the same. You don't have time to think too deeply, remember? So the first example that seems like relevant to you, go with it. Now, I said for instance instead of for example. That's another trick I recommend you memorize. It mixes up your vocabulary. You're showing vocabulary range in an easy, formatted, structured way. So one time for instance, one time for example. Good. Next, you need to provide your third body paragraph, and that will come from your counter argument. On the other hand, it could be argued that AI will cause job loss and social breakdown. Now, I really strongly recommend that you use that part of my template. On the other hand is good because you're signposting, this is a counter-argument, look, look, look. And so that's good for structure. It's also good for diverse vocabulary. Diverse? It's also good for showing a range of vocabulary. It could be argued is also a great phrase to introduce because it's in passive voice. Passive is a high-level English grammar pattern, okay? And it's very risky to use passive yourself that you make up while you are writing because A, passive is hard to create, and B, passive is often not natural and not correct in many situations. So I don't recommend that you try to use a lot of passive in your writing, but here it's good because you can memorize it, you know that it's exactly correct, and it's natural to use it in such a way. So it bumps up your grammar points in a safe way. Okay, so on the other hand, it could be argued that AI will cause job loss and social breakdown. However, job loss may not necessarily be a bad thing. If governments adapt by providing a universal basic income and incentives for people to do meaningful volunteer work, it's possible that society could actually become liberated. Now, I have used two sentences here to argue against the counterargument. You can use just one sentence. If you've got a strong enough sentence, that's fine. But the important point is that you start with however, and that you then argue back. All right? You don't just say, oh, it could be argued that AI will cause job loss. You need to say, yeah, but that's not so bad because, right? So you need an argument against it. However, job loss may not necessarily be a bad thing. All right? Something like this. Now, if you have no idea, you can't think of a good argument against it, then my final sentence might help you. And that's where I've said the positives of AI outweigh the negatives. So if you can't think of something yourself, you can always just say, however, the positives of AI outweigh the negatives. But if you've got a good argument that's stronger, and then you add, therefore, the positives of AI outweigh the negatives. Okay? Now be careful with that sentence. I'm arguing for the positives of AI, but if I was arguing for the negatives, I'd need to change this to therefore the negatives of AI outweigh the positives. So just adjust based on arguing. So next, the conclusion. And that should be just two sentences. Don't overcomplicate it, okay? And it's pretty easy to do the first conclusion sentence. You just always start with in conclusion. Please don't worry about different ways to say that. In conclusion is probably the best option in English. In conclusion, although AI carries risks, it has the potential to make society more efficient, innovative, and liberated. Now, what I've done there is I have restated my opinion and very quickly summarized each one of my body sentences. Now, that's the dream. That's the ideal way to write your first sentence of the conclusion. In reality, you may not have time and it may stress you out. It's enough if you just restate your opinion. Okay, so even if you just said, in conclusion, although AI carries risks, it's good for society. It's probably still enough to get you, up around 60 points in the PTE, so don't stress too much. Then for your second sentence, what can you do? It's quite hard for a conclusion to think of a second sentence because you shouldn't introduce new information in a conclusion. So this is where I recommend the should sentence that we wrote in our plan, okay? People should, or governments should, or big business should, or schools should, somebody should do something. So here I'm going to say, people should embrace AI while building systems that allow us to prosper alongside it. Done. Okay? So that's a nice, simple way. And you can adapt this template to any question type, all right? It's a nice, simple way to do your essay. So remember we said there were 3 minutes for planning, 12 minutes for writing, and then 5 minutes for checking. What are you going to check in those 5 minutes? If you have specific grammar problems that you know you have and you know you can fix with time, great, do it. But most people don't. Most people, if you know the grammar, then you don't make the mistake in the first place, right? Spelling, however, a lot of us do make spelling mistakes just because we're writing quickly, especially in English with double letters. So if you go back and spend a little bit of time looking at words like efficient and innovative, these long words that have you thinking, do I put 2 F's or 1? Do I put 2 N's or 1? Go back and look at them and just think slowly and carefully and try and correct any of those potential errors. It's a great essay. I think it would get you probably PTE 80, maybe even 85, maybe. But if you want to shoot for the stars, what you need to do now is spend a little bit of time looking at vocabulary upgrades. Okay, so how can you upgrade the vocabulary of this? Well, let me give you a few simple, easy swaps, and you can think of it this way. Instead of in my opinion, say in my view. Okay, it's not better, but it's rarer, it's more unusual, and therefore you might get a little bit of a vocabulary upgrade. We've said that AI can analyze huge amounts of data. You could put in vast instead of huge. Vast and huge, same meaning, but again, vast is a little bit rarer, and so it sounds a little bit fancier. It's showing that you know more words, basically, which the AI will like. So that would be a good upgrade too. Now here's a change that I think is actually a clear improvement to communication as well as getting your points. And that's if we change AI saves lives and we change that to it improves patient outcomes, yeah? We can use AI to improve patient outcomes. Now, that is better because it's more precise. Save lives is too dramatic. Yeah, academic English should not be dramatic. It should be very exact. And so what it does is it does improve the outcomes for patients. So that would also be better. One last point I will make for that upgrade is the first sentence. My template suggests that you say many people argue about. If you change that to whether or not something, and then is a topic of frequent debate, that will automatically, lift your vocabulary too, right? So in this case, it would be whether or not artificial intelligence will damage society is a topic of frequent debate. Now, the reason this will get you a better vocabulary and grammar score is because you are focusing on the nouns in the sentence. Yeah? When you say many people argue about, you're using argue, the verb, as a focus. But if we say it's a topic of frequent debate, you're focusing on the noun. And academic English likes that. Academic English likes things to be concrete. They like things, ideas as concrete things. So if you say it's a topic of frequent debate, it automatically sounds more academic, which means more points for your PTE essay. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. I think that is more than enough for your brain to handle now. But I just want to repeat, please stick with the simple essay if you are aiming for anything from PTE 50 to PTE 65. Honestly, even PTE 85, it's fine, okay? You want to focus on getting the ideas so that you can express something meaningful. Content matters for the PTE essay. But I've got those tips in just for those of you who want to really aim for 90. But don't do it. If you know your English is intermediate, don't use the extra tips because it will open more doors to create mistakes than it will help you to get a good essay score. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining my deep dive on the PTE essay, and I will look forward to seeing you at my next lesson, I hope. All right. Have a good week, everyone.